What you are about to hear is a story that has been buried inside Buckingham Palace for 3 years. A story that nobody was supposed to find. A story that involves the future King of England and a campaign so calculated, so deliberate, so carefully hidden behind layers of institutional language and plausible deniability that even the people inside the palace who knew it was happening could not prove it. Until now. Hello, friends. My name is James, and you are watching Royal Daily Report, your number one source for the most exclusive and most shocking royal stories on the internet. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button right now because tonight we are telling a story that will change everything you thought you knew about why Harry and Meghan really left. And if you have been with us from the beginning, you already know. We never hold back. We never pull back. Let us get into it. The official story has always been simple. Harry and Meghan found royal life too difficult. The press was too hostile. The institution was too rigid. The racism was too persistent. And so they left. They made a choice. They stepped back. They moved to California. That is the official story. That is the version that has been told and retold in documentaries and memoirs and interviews, and in thousands of articles across thousands of publications over the past 6 years. And parts of that story are true. The press was hostile. The institution was rigid. The racism was real and documented and devastating. All of that is true. But our source, a person who worked inside the palace during the period between 2018 and 2020, a person who has never spoken publicly before and who came to us at significant personal risk, says that the official story is missing something. Something that changes everything. Something that was not an accident or an institutional failure or the inevitable result of a clash between a modern woman and a centuries-old system. Something that was deliberate. Something that was planned. Something that was orchestrated by one person with the patience and the intelligence and the institutional knowledge to make it look like nobody's fault while making sure it had exactly one outcome. Prince William and his secret campaign to remove Meghan Markle from the royal family. Our source worked in a part of the palace that gave them visibility across multiple royal households. They were not in William's inner circle, but they were close enough to see things, to hear things, to notice patterns that only become visible when you are paying attention and when you have enough context to understand what you are seeing. And what they saw, what they have spent 3 years deciding whether to share, is a picture of a campaign that never announced itself, never left fingerprints, never gave anyone anything they could point to directly, but that our source says, with complete certainty, was real, was deliberate, and was William. It started before the wedding. Our source says the first signs appeared in late 2017 when Harry and Meghan's engagement was announced, and the initial wave of public and institutional reaction made clear that Meghan was going to be enormously popular, that she connected with people in a way that was immediate and powerful and unlike anything the royal family had seen in a generation. And our source says that popularity, that immediate, undeniable, electric popularity, was the thing that started everything. Because popularity inside the royal family is not simply a good thing. It is a currency, and currencies create competition. And competition, inside an institution built entirely on hierarchy and precedence and carefully managed public profiles, is dangerous. Our source says there were conversations, early conversations, quiet conversations, the kind that happen in side rooms and over private dinners and in the margins of official engagements, about what Meghan's popularity meant, about what it would do to the careful balance of public attention that the royal family had maintained for years, about who would be overshadowed, about who would benefit and who would not. And our source says William was in some of those conversations and was not comfortable with what he heard. The campaign, according to our source, operated on 3 levels simultaneously. 3 levels that never touched each other directly, that could never be traced back to a single source, that were designed to look like separate, unrelated institutional decisions and individual choices and coincidental bad luck. But that our source says were coordinated, were connected, were pointed in a single direction, toward making Meghan's position inside the royal family so uncomfortable, so untenable, so professionally and personally isolating that leaving would eventually feel like the only option. The first level was the press. Our source is careful here, very careful. They do not claim that William personally called editors or personally placed stories. That is not how it works. That is not how it has ever worked inside the royal family. What they say is something more subtle and more difficult to prove, but no less real. They say that the flow of information from palace sources to certain journalists, information about Meghan, about her behavior, about her relationships with staff, about tensions inside the household, was not random, was not the inevitable result of a large institution with many employees, some of whom talked to journalists, was directed, was shaped. Stories that were damaging to Meghan appeared with a consistency and a specificity and a timing that our source says cannot be explained by coincidence. They appeared when Meghan was gaining positive momentum. They appeared when something had happened that made her look good and needed to be complicated. They appeared with details that could only have come from a small number of sources. And our source says the direction of that information, not the information itself, but the direction of it, the decision about which journalists received it and when, came from a place that was connected to William's world. The second level was internal, inside the palace, inside the machinery of the institution itself. Our source describes a pattern of what they call institutional friction, decisions that went against Meghan's requests without clear justification, support that was promised and then did not materialize, resources that were available for other members of the family that were suddenly unavailable when Meghan needed them, staff who were sympathetic to Meghan finding themselves quietly reassigned, initiatives that Meghan had proposed and invested time in being deprioritized or canceled without explanation. None of these things individually was a crisis. None of them individually was something you could point to and say, this is evidence of a campaign. They were the kind of friction that could always be explained away. Competing priorities, budget constraints, scheduling conflicts, the ordinary friction of a large and complicated institution. But our source says the pattern was not ordinary. The pattern was too consistent, too specifically targeted at Meghan's ability to do her job, to feel supported, to build the kind of institutional foundation that would have made staying possible. And our source says that pattern had a source, a quiet, patient, deniable source, connected to the future king. The third level was the most personal and the most damaging. And it is the level that our source finds most difficult to discuss. Because this level involved Harry directly. It involved the relationship between two brothers. And it involved, according to our source, a deliberate effort by William to use that relationship, the love Harry had for his brother, the loyalty Harry felt toward the family he had grown up in, as a tool. Our source says William had conversations with Harry during this period that our source describes as dripping conversations. Conversations that did not say anything directly negative about Meghan, that could not be quoted or referenced or thrown back at William later, but that planted things, doubts, concerns, questions, small, carefully chosen observations about Meghan's behavior, about her ambitions, about whether certain things she was doing were wise, about whether Harry was getting the full picture of how things were being perceived inside the institution. Conversations that were framed as brotherly concern, as one Windsor looking out for another, as William sharing things Harry needed to know, but that our source says were calculated to create distance, to slowly, incrementally, introduce uncertainty into the one relationship that was holding Meghan in place. Because if Harry had doubts about Meghan, if William could make Harry question her, even slightly, even momentarily, then the whole structure became more fragile, more vulnerable, more likely to crack under the pressure that the first two levels of the campaign were simultaneously applying from outside. Our source says this third level ultimately failed. Failed because Harry's love for Meghan was stronger than the doubts that William tried to plant. Failed because Meghan was perceptive enough to notice what was happening and honest enough with Harry to name it. Failed because there came a point, a specific point that our source believes happened sometime in late 2019, when Harry saw the whole picture clearly, saw the press stories and the institutional friction and the dripping conversations as connected, as parts of the same thing, and made a choice that William had not anticipated. Instead of choosing the family over Meghan, Harry chose Meghan. And the campaign, instead of achieving its objective of removing Meghan while keeping Harry, achieved something else entirely. It removed both of them. Our source says William did not expect that outcome. Says that the assumption behind the campaign, the fundamental assumption that William and his advisors operated on throughout this period, was that Harry would not leave. That Harry was too embedded in the institution. too defined by his royal identity, too dependent on the structure and the support and the belonging that royal life provided. That when the pressure became intense enough, Meghan would leave and Harry would stay, and the institution would return to its previous equilibrium. Our source says the moment that assumption proved wrong, the moment it became clear that Harry was going with Meghan, that he was choosing her over everything, was the most surprising moment William had experienced inside the palace in years. He had not built a contingency for that outcome, had not planned for the possibility that his brother would choose a woman over a crown. And our source says that surprise, that genuine, total surprise, is itself evidence of how completely William had misread his brother, had underestimated the depth of what Harry and Meghan had failed to understand that the loyalty he was trying to exploit was ultimately pointed in a different direction than he assumed. Harry does not know the full picture. That is what our source says, and it is the detail that haunts them most. Harry knows that things were difficult, knows the press was hostile, knows the institution failed him and Meghan in ways that were not accidental. He has said all of this publicly. But the specific, organized, deliberate nature of what our source is describing, the three-level campaign, the directed press stories, the institutional friction, the dripping conversations, Harry does not know this. Not completely. Not with the specificity that our source has described to us tonight. And our source says this is the thing they cannot make peace with. That Harry has spent 6 years trying to rebuild a relationship with a brother who, according to our source, was running a campaign against his wife while shaking his hand, who was planting doubts about Meghan while telling Harry he was concerned for him, who was directing institutional friction while presenting himself as frustrated by it alongside Harry, who was doing all of this with such patience and such deniability that even now, 6 years later, Harry does not have the full picture. Meghan suspects. Our source says Meghan has always suspected more than she has said publicly. That her instincts about what was happening, about the source of the specific, targeted nature of the hostility she experienced, were accurate from very early on. That she said things to Harry during that period that were closer to the truth than Harry was ready to hear. And that she made a choice, a deliberate choice, not to push harder on those suspicions because she understood that if she pushed Harry to choose between his wife's instincts and his brother's word, she might lose. Might lose Harry. And losing Harry was the one outcome she would not risk. So she absorbed the suspicion, kept it private, and waited. And our source says Meghan has been waiting a long time, and is still waiting. Not for revenge, not for exposure, for the moment when Harry is ready to see the full picture. And our source believes that moment is coming. Believes that the conversations Harry and William had at their secret meeting, the meeting we covered on this channel, the 3 hours and 40 minutes, the hug at the door, began something. Opened something. And that as Harry and William rebuild, slowly and painfully and imperfectly, Harry is going to start asking questions. Real questions. The kind that require real answers. And that when he asks those questions, William is going to face a choice that the campaign of 2018 and 2019 never had to face. Whether to tell his brother the truth. Our source does not know what William will choose. Does not know whether the future king will find the courage to sit across from his brother and say, I did things during those years that I am not proud of, that I justified to myself at the time as protecting the institution, as protecting Harry from a situation I did not think was good for him, but that I know now were wrong, that hurt you and hurt Meghan in ways that I need to own. Our source does not know if William is capable of that conversation. Says that the William they observed during those years, patient, calculating, completely certain that the institution's needs and his own judgments about those needs were the same thing, is not obviously the William who would find that conversation possible. But our source also says something else. Something that gives them, and us, and perhaps you watching tonight, a small and fragile and genuine reason for hope. They say that the William who crossed a room and hugged his brother after 2 years of silence, that William is different from the William who ran a 3-level campaign against his brother's wife. That something has shifted. That the illness in their father, the passage of time, the reality of what was lost, has done something to William that the campaign years William would not have predicted, has made him more human, more capable of the kind of honesty that human beings need from each other, more aware that the institution he was protecting during those years is not worth what it cost. Our source says they do not know if that is enough. but they say it is something. And after everything, after 3 years of sitting on this story and deciding whether to tell it, after everything they saw and everything they know, something is enough to hold on to. The question now is what happens with this information. Whether it reaches Harry, whether it changes anything, whether the secret campaign of 2018 and 2019 becomes part of the conversation between two brothers who are slowly, painfully, finding their way back to each other. Whether William ever looks at Harry and says the thing that needs to be said. Whether Harry ever learns the full picture of what was done to his wife. And whether Meghan, who suspected all of it, who absorbed all of it, who made the choice not to push for the truth because keeping Harry mattered more than being vindicated, ever gets the acknowledgement that our source says she has always deserved. The acknowledgement that she was not paranoid, was not difficult, was not the problem that the campaign tried to make her, was a woman who walked into an institution that had decided before she arrived what it was going to do to her, and who survived it, with her marriage intact, with her children loved and protected, with her dignity more or less in one piece, despite everything that was thrown at her from a direction she could sense but never fully prove. Until tonight. That is all for tonight, friends. I am James, and this has been Royal Daily Report. If this story hit different for you tonight, hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you have not already, and turn on those notifications because we are covering every single development in this story as it happens. Share this with someone who needs to hear the full picture today. I will see you in the next one. Until then, stay informed, stay curious, and stay royal. Goodbye, friends.